video. And I want to remind the audience, please keep the questions coming. They were terrific the first time around. We have retained those that you labeled for both developers up here, but we look forward to any additional questions that you have. With that, I'll turn and ask the Planning Commission members, any questions that you have?
Based on your initial marketing, do you have a very rough idea of sales versus rental on the residential component of the project?
Use the, no?
No.
There's.
How about now? All right. Everything is rental in this analysis. We have studied the for sale product. It has several different factors that would impact this particular plan, but we certainly understand the dynamics of that market and some of the demand that is there. But for this proposal, everything is rental.
I know there's a lot of concern from citizens relative to potentially having a boutique hotel. What considerations have you had with that?
We did read the study that was provided as part of the original documents. We did reach out to some of our hotel contacts. We did not receive a lot of strong feedback on that. So it was an idea that while we explored it, I think we quickly kind of realized that it may not be the best use at this particular time based on the people that we talked to and the time frame that we had.
Can you explain a little bit of the site circulation? You know, you're obviously proposing 2 new public rights of way south of where the old hospital is, and how you think that would affect Marlowe and kind of the residential nature of the street.
Sure, I'll let Scott speak to this one.
Thank you. Excellent question. See if we can find the master plan. So basically, there's a 10-foot drop from Marlowe to Bell, and we saw this corridor as the most likely location to sort of break down the size of blocks. So it's a little bit more manageable than, you know, the full length all the way down, basically. And then the second is really it's a when it's not being used for service, it's more of a pedestrian walkway, and it leads into the main green space. But basically, we can service the mixed-use building off of the cut-through here, and there's also servicing behind the Curtis block. But we see pedestrian circulation happening pretty much all through the site, coming through the L-shaped public space that Ted described for you, but spilling out on basically all these sides.
Do you have any distinction between, you know, apartment people and then people coming maybe for the retail or the office portion? Is there going to be different gates for the parking garage?
It'll probably be bifurcated in the garage in some fashion. We haven't gotten to that point. The entries, which I didn't address, you have one off of the new public cut-through avenue, and then there's also an access off of Bell at this corner. But yeah, I think it would be divided in some fashion.
One of the questions that always comes before us through the community vision and through any proposal is what impact on stormwater. And you've clearly articulated some very innovative issues. Is this a zero discharge or even a net negative in retaining more stormwater than the site itself would receive?
I'll touch on it briefly, then probably turn it over to Ted. You know, I think in all our infill projects, this has increasingly become a hot button topic. So we've had some good experience on underground detention systems, on kind of unique creative solutions. With that said, we've never had the opportunity to incorporate it into and activate a park with it. So I think that created a positive solution in our minds to it, but I'll let Ted talk to the specifics.
And while at this level we haven't been doing detailed calculations on how much stormwater is created, it is certainly our intent to have zero impact. But also through these devices, how can we slow that water and prevent it from ever getting into the system. But we will have, I imagine, we will maximize the amount of stormwater drainage into rain gardens and into vegetated places, if you will. And what we don't capture, we'll probably have a couple underground cisterns, but we will use that water to irrigate and keep it on site and recycle it.
Good.
Do you have a idea as to like the estimated number of like permanent jobs that your development will have in both construction and then permanent jobs?
Question about the parking. I'm led to believe from here that so none of the parking will be contiguous to the office and the retail use. Is that correct? It's going to be it's a separate.
Within the garage?
Yeah, it's in the garage.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Correct.
You know, often when new projects come before the planning commission that start to abut the residential section to the south, we get a lot of relationship that needs to be managed on the developer's part. Seems like you'll have it on three sides potentially with all the new development mass you're proposing here. How are you guys prepared to manage those relationships with the neighbors?
Sure. It's a great question, and you know, for us, when we come into a new market, which Lakewood would be for us, we truly want to embed ourselves in that market, and we are also an asset developer. So this is a product that we are going to build, own, and manage for the long term, and we want to become a business resident of Lakewood as well as having all these new residential opportunities through our project. So we work kind of from day one, not only through the community engagement process and through the city approval process, but along kind of that community business engagement process and creating those relationships up front. Some of that we've already started in our focus groups. And developing in tight quarters is challenging, and it is, you know, you have to be on top of it to keep everybody happy and up to date. Information is key, and the availability of that information and communication is essential. So those are the keys from our standpoint. We're going to be their neighbors for a long time, so we want to have that relationship start on the right foot.
Mr. Chair, we're going to try to get through two more questions from Planning Commission.
Thank you. Synthesizing some of the comments that I think we're all making, maybe a way to ask this question is, if I'm not a resident of this particular development and I'm visiting this site, I'm pretty limited to retail, correct me if I'm wrong, retail at the Curtis Block, the smaller interactive building in the plaza, one level of retail in the mixed use, and three or so levels of office in the mixed use. And that's pretty much the public interaction and parking, of course. But it's a little, am I let me just finish the question. Am I characterizing that correctly?
In quantity, perhaps. In character, I'm not sure. I think the character of that retail is such that it will have a significant draw. But so I think in quantity, while it is little, I think the intent behind that is purposeful, and that it will be significant and have year-long and daily draw.
Anything else? We'll yield our time to the gentleman across the aisle here.
We'll certainly take advantage of that. Thank you. Well, I'll start off by thanking you guys for being here and another thoughtful response here. Talking about the public space on the corner, not to rehash what our thoughts may be on why we want to see it or don't see it, but we can get into that. The scale of this is such that you've planted a retail pavilion, and I'll take an early question, which I also had. If you could describe what that retail pavilion is it a multi-tenant sort of space? Is it very glassy? It seems to have some pretty cool design features to it. But from a material standpoint and also the use, what is it meant to do?
Well, honestly, the idea was to bring the retail pavilion out as close to the sidewalk as we could. As we worked through some of the designs for the public space with Ted and his team, the idea also was that it would be almost transparent. And we're working on another ice cream shop for a similar client that's almost all glass. I mean, it's possible basically to have the service part into a very small section, and it's really geared towards more of an entertainment anchor than, for sale retail. And to sort of back up what Colby was saying as far as intent, I think most of the ground floor is really envisioned that way as opposed to a retail destination.
Okay, great, thanks. I'm thinking, when I first saw it, I thought of the what's now the Dynamite hamburger place downtown on Star Plaza, which was started off as an all-glass box as a visitor center or something like that, and it basically was a chair storage unit for a number of years before it turned into a burger place, in which case they walled it all up, and there's very little glass left to that. Kind of a really beautiful little structure, so it's nice to hear about the programming of what that might be and the fact that it's very transparent. Thank you, Scott.
I guess just, while we're talking about the little pavilion, I do appreciate that it addresses Detroit. I think the way you've broken up the public space is nice. It sort of allows a visitor to kind of take multiple ways deeper into the site, but still kind of holds that line of Detroit. It's the only thing, just looking at the site plan, I guess a little, that the service or the pedestrian walk that divides the north block and the middle block, I mean, I'm just concerned that that'll end up feeling like an alley, just with kind of the backs of buildings there. I think it was Gary mentioned the potential of adding townhome units to the north end of the garage. That, I don't know if that would help. I don't know if that messes with your parking count, but
yeah, I mean,
just want to make
Alley
sure
might be
that
kind of fun opportunity.
I think that's exactly. I think the
Yeah.
alley could be an opportunity to create an even more unique space, even though it functions as a service drive. I think we actually are doing some similar stuff where, whether it's through creative lighting or another opportunity to have more gathering, food truck festival, things like that, a lot of it could get into the programming of the final space.
Could you get into the programming of the building on the east side of the lawn a little more? Are those residential units that face the lawn, facing west on the ground floor? I'm wondering if there's opportunity for those to be kind of more of a community programming.
Mm-hmm.
I see that as activating the space more than a residential unit that will probably be complaining about noise going on out there. There maybe is an opportunity to have that. It's an engaging space.
It is something that we did explore. I think Scott and his team have done a great job with kind of defining that space within the space on that side for the residential units. It is an impact that we discuss. And in our experience, combining some of those uses in a building of that size can be a challenge, but certainly something that we could explore further.
Those would probably be the hardest units to rent, I would think.
You'd be surprised. Yeah, we have units on a public green on another project, and they're very successful. So it's the market has become, in a way, very much more particular, and there are segments of the market that demand different things. And I think we have a site plan that allows us to have multiple product types and multiple settings and offer a lot of people a lot of opportunities for a choice to live. So it's all in how that eventual programming of the public space happens and how it's integrated, but it's certainly a concern, I think, for everybody.
Maybe an opportunity for like a runnable pavilion space that opens up onto the lawn that the whole community could use, classrooms that you could learn about how the rainwater, the rain garden works and the sustainable features of the site.
Sure.
I think there could be an opportunity there to engage it with,
Right.
with the lawn as opposed to having it be closed off just for those residents.
Okay.
The southern block,
Yes.
that there's just to the north of it, there's that new public road there that cuts across the site. Is that the roads that back into that block, those private drives, I assume, to get back to the parking?
Those
Or
would be
those-
private, yeah, off that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And that center building is a little pavilion with a pool adjacent to it?
Yeah, and to, the term clubhouse gets used a lot, but it's not really a clubhouse. In the images that were flashing of the Casto projects, there's a very modern, open, multifunctional space, and that's really what these spaces are turning into. They're not a standard suburban clubhouse in a lot of people's minds. So it's a much different space than I think what a lot of people are imagining.
Mr. Chairman, if I may jump in, as I often do in these meetings, I would just like to ask the team just about, one of the development objectives was about incorporating, the memory of the hospital. How did the team address that?
Yeah, so, I'll let Scott and Peter or whoever else wants to chime in. We looked at it, and I think architecturally, we had some challenge with incorporating that. I think the idea is replacing the community aspect with the public space in the corner and the activity, so that it's still a part of the community and offering something to the community more so than the actual physical structure itself. Of course, the Curtis block, we think, lends itself to a tremendous rehab project. So that one, I think, fit very well. But yeah, I think the idea of just maintaining that community element in the design is how we interpreted that objective.
It seems like the Curtis block has got to feel like the luckiest little set of buildings here in Lakewood, because we have a lot of those, and so I'd like to take on a few more. That'd be great. I'm going to use one of the questions that came out because I was thinking about this as well, as far as if you want to go to the plaza, again, up front, but also maybe an overall site plan and how it ties into the grassy area, which is all part of that north part, I guess. But one of the questions was regarding the plaza, how is it sensible to pedestrians? Can you guys talk about the materials? You talked about having to mitigate that 15-foot difference from one end of the site to the other, but you're going to be bringing the street level, probably heavily into that north part of it. So for everyone's knowledge, maybe just talk about some of those materials that you'd be touching on the ground, they'd be hanging out on and whatever.
I do think we imagine a really rich set of materials, not just one thing, but rich materials that are durable. I mean, we hope and plan on this having a lot of use, and it has to be durable and maintainable. I think there are some subtleties that are maybe a little hard to pick up in just the glance at the site plan, but in terms of that grade change, there are a couple kind of a walk shown there from the Bell-Detroit intersection and another one kind of due north-south from Detroit that is 5% slope or less, and we think that's really significant. And that, folks, is a slope that really is pretty comfortable for somebody to push a baby stroller, or if you're in a wheelchair to negotiate. It doesn't require a handicap ramp or rails. It is a 5% slope, and it's very manageable. But that also creates these opportunities for stairs, steps, even large ones that are seating opportunities. And so we see that kind of really helping define that space up front and create some vitality right outside of a restaurant, for example, or right outside of the ice cream shop. So we're really excited about how dynamic that space can be and still very connected to Detroit and pedestrian traffic east-west along Detroit.
Mr. Chair, we can go through one more question from ABR, if you guys have one, and then we'll turn it over to questions from the audience.
The predominant materials on the exterior of these buildings are what?
We have shown these elevations soft for a reason. I think that still needs to be determined. But certainly, as we work through the process, I think we would want to achieve what is acceptable to everyone. Typically, most of our buildings are masonry. If we're using any sort of hardy panel or hardy board or something like that. But yeah, I mean, we are very familiar with the various arrays of materials. It ultimately is what's the right fit for the community and what, through this collaborative process, what we land on.
I'll go to some of the public questions here, and they're terrific. Thank you, everyone. This was broached by Mr. Coyne just briefly, but since there are at least 6 questions on this topic, I'll go back to the question about rental and potential ownership mix. At least half a dozen talk about, is this all residential? What is the possibility of owner-occupied units or condos or other things that people can own in this development?
And again, and thanks for the question. Again, it is, in this analysis, an all rental project, and we believe that is the right programming for this proposal. We have done some analysis on the for sale product, and quite honestly, it's not too much different than what you're seeing from the South Block. However, I think what we'd run into are potentially some challenges in the interaction and the uses. But it's something that we do have experience in and we could explore, but if we wanted to put the best proposal forward, we think it's an all rental proposal.
And then just to follow up on that, to clarify, particularly in the South Block, there's a couple questions about those amenities, the pool and the non-suburban clubhouse. What are those for the occupants or those amenities that the public can access? What's the plan for those?
They would be private. However, in a similar setting with that similar style building, at another project we have opened up to local Chamber of Commerce or events like that if they had a larger meeting that they can utilize that space.
Okay.
So that's an opportunity that could be there.
Thank you.
Great. So many to choose from here. We'll try to get through. Right. We do have actually 3, I think, that kind of fall into the same category. Talking about public space, again, I think that's the zone that a lot of people will touch a lot more. But this question is, the grass area seems to be limited in access to the public. Follow-up to that one or an adjacent one was, is burying or hiding the public space separating from Detroit intentional? So those are.
I'll add, there are a couple questions similar to that are over here too.
I think, again, we really wanted to create a connected system of open space, but we also recognized that as you get further into the space and it's bordered by residential and more office, that space may start to feel a little more semi-private, if you will. Still, it's our intent. It's all open to the public. We want to program that space. We want to work with the community on a variety of programs. That open lawn provides flexibility for certain program types that maybe the plaza won't. So again, I think we anticipate the plaza feeling the most open and public. It opens the arms to Detroit and Bell. But we also think that that lawn can very much be part of that public space and feel open, not only through programming, but through the design. Also, with the amount where the garage is located, that's going to be this natural path north and south. If you've driven here and not walked here, you'll park in that garage, and it's going to be a nice entrance for you moving north.
So this is a question from before. What steps has your team taken to make sure Lakewood people, Lakewood companies are both participating in the construction and ultimately in any of the retail opportunities there?
We were certainly mindful of the business community in our retail analysis of this. and careful to plan about these future opportunities not having any impact. Certainly, the office opportunity for growth, I think, is significant. And as far as jobs on the construction end, locally, Eric, again, I'll defer to you.
We've done numerous jobs with community involvement, community outreach. We reach out to the market and we reach out to the trades during the contracting period to make sure that the local resources and labor are encouraged to be involved within the project.
Thank you.
All right, here's the question. Seems like neither presentation has a water feature, although we did see one earlier. If the first one did, it must be smaller. I did not notice. Okay. Could there be a water feature in this one like they have in Europe or small town squares?
And I'm assuming that's not the water feature, the rail that's shown, but as a fountain or a more activated water system.
Maybe something more interactive or splashy.
Yeah, and actually the example that's shown is actually the London Rail, and it's a very interactive system. And it's a system that a lot of larger cities and their downtowns are looking to explore as a stormwater solution. And I think that the real image that we showed of the girl playing in the rail, I mean, it's an interactive experience, and that was definitely purposeful.
Thank you.
So one of the questions is, have you explored acquiring additional property on Bell or Marlowe? And if so, how would that change your plan?
We're always exploring. So I think, yes, there certainly are, I think, a lot of opportunities, but not on necessarily Bell or Marlowe.
All right, another 20,000-foot question, perhaps. How is this project setting itself apart from other developments currently being built, i.e. McKinley Place and Rockport?
Well, certainly the scale and the mix of uses, and the offering, the product offering here, and its variety. I think this is truly mixed use and urban in every sense of the word. I think those are lovely projects as well, but they're more townhouse oriented. We certainly have that element, and it's appropriate, we think, where it's placed in here. But we also have other offerings, not only for residential, but for office and retail and the public space as well, of course.
Yes, what traffic studies have been done? How will this development impact existing traffic patterns? What's the outlook for traffic congestion and plans to address it?
To this point, we have not engaged a traffic engineer for a study. We certainly, if we were selected, would do so, and recognize that that is a very important piece of the puzzle that we would work with in partnership with the city to find the appropriate solutions to.
Back to the garage real quick. In the apartments that surround it, the question has to do with concerns about the experience of people living there. Would there be noise, cars rumbling, et cetera?
Yes, I think it would be very challenging to eliminate all noise from a garage structure. But however, in this setting, I think that, and the type of units in the market that we would be gearing towards, I think that there would be a level of acceptance. Our infill projects have either garages next to them, or we have buildings with garages in them. There's interaction with garages a lot. And I think it is a little bit a nature of the urban product that comes along with the territory.
I have my own question of clarification. So the apartments that ring the parking garage, do they have direct access from the parking garage to those units from inside? So how would they access? They have to go outside and come in the front?
There'll be a number of entry points, but they won't be directly from the garage into the unit. There's a corridor that wraps around. And also, to Colby's earlier point, it'll be two different structural systems. The garage will be a concrete system, and there'll be an isolation between that and a stick-build liner. So that you can mitigate the vibration somewhat with that. Yeah, corridor also separates the garage.
Okay, thank you.
All right. This is a question from, this is a neighbor-based question. Family moved back to town, back to home to Lakewood. What do you see as two major benefits? This is a Marla neighbor, apparently. To immediate what are the benefits to the immediate neighbors of this project? And what are at least two tangible drawbacks? How's that?
Wow.
At least, it says.
Okay.
Could be more.
Well, I think the opportunities for entertainment and recreation use, the walkability, certainly for someone in Marlow, is a huge positive. Perhaps there is an employment opportunity, or I think it creates and activates a large site in a way that doesn't disrupt the existing pedestrian and neighborhood flow. So I don't know how many I just rattled off, but on a negative, I personally can't see any. That
Okay. Presume that would be the answer to that part. Okay, Lou?
Just going back, I think we've done pretty well on these questions. Back on the public space question. So there's one question that says, because the green grassy area isn't visible from the street, how will it be policed? And probably coupled with that question is, what rules and regulations, or who actually will be the owner and or programmer of that space?
I think that's to be determined. We have done it in multiple fashions as we've worked through different projects. We have projects that public space is owned by the city, but the developer maintains it, and we have it vice versa. So I think it really, again, is getting the best feel throughout the process. What is the best, most efficient way and appropriate way to maintain it and police it.
Still good? Yeah. Great. Just sort of some numbers. What is the acreage of the plaza and the lawn and the grove, sort of individually and collectively is a question. And I think it's a follow-up is how many people do you guys think that those areas could hold?
I have those stats, I think, pretty close. Combined, it is 0.8 acres, so just under an acre combined. The lawn itself is about 60 by 120 feet, 7,200 square feet. But we also perceive, again, some of that hardscape that surrounds it and that grove is really part of that bigger space too. So it roughly breaks down in half. So if you combine, just for reference, the grove and the lawn together is about 0.4 acres, and then that plaza space is about another 0.4. Oh, and capacity. Capacity is another one, and we did look at that, and we look at some metrics for that based on are you having a function where folks are sitting as we are tonight in kind of a theater style, watching a movie or something like that, versus sitting at tables because there's some sort of dinner happening, or is everybody standing shoulder to shoulder because there's a concert going on. And just some rough numbers, if people were sitting at tables, you can put a couple hundred, 200 people or so on that lawn, 200 to 300. If people are standing shoulder to shoulder, I don't know if we'll have a concert of that scale and size, but you could have up to about 800 people on that lawn.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Chair, we'll do one more question from Planning Commission and one more from ABR.
Great. Mr. Coyne.
I'm not sure anybody from the public would have asked this, but I have a question. Since it's so, I'm sorry to keep harping on this, but since it's so rental heavy, in your recent projects that you've worked on, do you have a sense of how long the typical tenancy is in your units? And then as a follow-up, do you do any of the Airbnb or any other transient type short-term rentals in any of the projects you've recently done?
I'll address the last one first. We are exploring Airbnb in some of our new projects. One in Cincinnati we are looking at. And as far as the turnover rate, I think are normal across our whole portfolio may be misleading because in an infill setting like this, it's significantly less than it is in a suburban setting. So in our buildings that we've opened in the last year or two, we've had probably 7 to 9 turnover a year, and most people are re-upping. I think what we're finding in those projects, in particular with empty nesters, they're attracted to the type of lifestyle, and they've made a commitment to change the way they're looking at living, and that is kind of in this rental setting, but they're a long-term renter. And I think we're seeing that a lot in this type of setting.
Great. One last question on the green sheets then. I think you've answered this to some extent, but it may be a chance to reinforce it. How will you ensure the South Block doesn't feel isolated? Parenthetically, there are projects like this in Tremont and Westlake that feel closed out in sort of blocky. Not sure what the blocky part question is from, but as far as isolation, some folks may want that, but it's probably a balance that you guys have to deal with in design, so maybe you could address that.
I think that street feels very well, having both sides lined. I think the architectural language will probably be similar to connect the projects together. They certainly will stand on their own and be unique, but there will be a probably common theme or vernacular that carries through the project to help to tie it together. But I think that image, these would be the liner units, and those would be the townhouse units. So I think that speaks very well to how that feel could be.
Great. All right. Thank you. No further questions, I guess.
Mr. Chair, thank you for a second round of really thoughtful discussion. Let's give the Casto and North Point team a round of applause. Casto, North Point, you guys did a great job tonight. Thank you for being here from the administration, Planning Commission, and ABR. Very well done tonight, and thanks again for being here. Mr. Chair, just as the first round, we'll do a receive and file from Planning Commission to kick us off.
Chair again will move to receive and file this communication. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Good? No? That's received.
All right. ABR side, I'll make a motion to receive and file this communication as well. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So good.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to, we've been here for a long time tonight. I did want to thank everybody for being here and sticking this night out for 2.5 hours. We were very excited to put this on. I did want to take the time to thank my staff. Alex, Michelle, and Caitlin behind me did a lot of hard work putting this night on. Let's give them a round of applause. So just as a quick reminder, we are going to take all the questions that we received tonight, document them, and post them to our website, onelakewood.com/downtownrfq. Based on the volume, it might take us a day or two, but please look out for that document. It'll be provided to both Casto and to Carnegie to incorporate in the interviews we have with our advisory panel and throughout the summer. So again, thank you for being here tonight. We are going to stick around for the next maybe 10, 15 minutes, so if you have a question that you'd like to come up and talk to us about, please.